Okay, so we're going to start scene 4 of Act 1 now, and fortunately, coming off of scene 3, this is much shorter. It's only 2.5 pages. So if you want to turn to page 24 of your No Fear books, that's where Act 1, Scene 4 begins, and I'll read for you a summary that you might want to use and just write it at the top of your page. So Duncan hears how nobly the Thane of Cawdor died. So at this point, they've executed the Thane of Cawdor. And then Macbeth and Banquo are greeted by the king, who proclaims his son Malcolm as his heir. He then says he will visit Macbeth's castle. So we can imagine they've all come all the way back up close to Forest, and here is where Duncan's going to announce his heir. Is execution done on Cawdor, and not those in commission yet returned? Liege, they are not yet come back, but I have spoke with one that saw him die, who did report that very frankly he confessed his treasons, implored your highness's pardon, and set forth a deep repentance. Nothing in his life became him like leaving it. He died as one that had been studied in his death, to throw away the dearest thing he owed, as 'twere a careless trifle. There's no art to find the mind's construction in the face. He was a gentleman on whom I built an absolute trust. Enter Macbeth, Banquo, Ross and Angus. O worthiest cousin, the sin of my ingratitude even now was heavy on me. Thou art so far before that swiftest wing of recompense is slow to overtake thee. Would thou hadst less deserved, that the proportion both of thanks and payment might have been mine. Only I have left to say, more is thy due than more than all can pay. The service and the loyalty I owe in doing it pays itself. Your highness's part is to receive our duties, and our duties are to your throne and state, children and servants, which do but what they should, by doing everything save towards your love and honour. Welcome hither. I have begun to plant thee, and will labour to make thee full of growing. To Banquo. Noble Banquo, that hast no less deserved, nor must be known no less to have done so. Let me enfold thee and hold thee to my heart. There if I grow, the harvest is your own. Thy plenteous joys, wanton in fullness, seek to hide themselves in drops of sorrow. Sons, kinsmen, thanes, and you whose places are the nearest, know we will establish our estate upon our eldest, Malcolm, whom we name hereafter the Prince of Cumberland, which honour must not unaccompanied invest him only, but signs of nobleness like stars shall shine in all who deserves. To Macbeth. From hence to Inverness, and bind us further to you. The rest is labour which is not used for you. I'll be myself the harbinger, and make joyful the hearing of my wife with your approach. So humbly take my leave. My worthy Cawdor. Aside. The Prince of Cumberland. That is a step on which I must fall down, or else o'erleap, for in my way it lies. Stars, hide your fires. Let not light see my black and deep desires. The eye winketh the hand, yet let that be which the eye fears, when it is done, to see. True worthy Banquo, he is full so valiant, and in his commendations I am fed. It is a banquet to me. Let's after him, whose care is gone before to bid us welcome. It is a peerless kinsman. Okay, so that is done. So we'll go back to page 24, the start of the scene, and we'll add in some themes and vocabulary. So the very first vocabulary that I want you to take note of is line 2, and Duncan refers to people who are in commission. So in commission means that they have been paid or delegated the task to carry out the execution of the previous Thane of Cawdor. Malcolm's description of the execution is, at least to me or other people who are knowledgeable of history, very reminiscent of Queen Mary, so the Queen of Scots execution. So if you know your history, you know that Mary, Queen of Scots, was kept imprisoned by her cousin, Queen Elizabeth of England. So Shakespeare had previously worked for Queen Elizabeth of England, and she was a fan of his. And she died, and she left her throne to King James, who was Queen Mary of Scots' son. And she was said to have accepted her treason and died very nobly. And this description of his death reminds me a lot of that. If we go down to line 8, Malcolm says that nothing in his life became him like leaving it. So he means nothing gave him dignity like the way he died. And basically he said that he was sorry and that he blessed the king. And if we look at line 10, he says, the thing he owed, as 'twere a careless trifle, owed here means owned on line 10. If we go down to Duncan, Duncan says, there's no art to find the mind's construction in the face. Construction here on line 13 means inner or true workings. And when he says, he was a gentleman on whom I built an absolute trust just underneath, this is what we could call foreshadowing, because it forebodes Macbeth's ultimate betrayal. And it is deeply ironic that Duncan has already built absolute trust on Cawdor and was betrayed, and now he's seeing Macbeth coming in, and he says, he's just saying the words, a man I built absolute trust on, as Macbeth enters. And so this is what we call dramatic irony. So it's deeply, deeply ironic that Duncan is speaking of trust as the very man who is going to murder him enters. And this trust is shown here to be both Duncan's greatest strength and his greatest downfall. We'll go down after Macbeth, Banquo, Ross, and Angus enter. And if we look at line 18, there's the word recompense, and that means reward. And here Duncan's just talking about how much he wants to reward Macbeth. Again, deep dramatic irony that he is wanting to reward Macbeth. And if we think about this from Macbeth's naive standpoint, he's just been told he'll become king. He walks up to Duncan, and Duncan's going on and on and on about how he cannot reward him enough. He's going to give him a big reward. And then he says that his son's going to be Prince of Cumberland, which means he's heir to the Scottish throne. So if we think Macbeth's mind, he's almost thinking, oh, you know, it's finally happening. Duncan's going to make me king. He's talking about rewarding. He can't reward me enough. What's the biggest reward he could give me? His throne, his crown. And so this is almost setting Macbeth up to fail. And this is definitely shown mostly in those last two lines on page 24, where it says, only I have left to say, more is thy due, than more than all can pay. So I cannot thank you enough. I cannot pay you enough for what you've done. Turning over to page 26, and we look at the very end of Macbeth speaking. We're looking at the side of the page and we count down. That's line 28. He says the phrase safe to ward. This means safeguard. So we're saying safeguard your love and honor. So this is in the context of him saying, oh, you don't need to reward me. It's my duty to safeguard you, to fight for you. And that's reward enough, is doing my job. Then we look at Duncan speaking. If we go down, he uses the word enfold, which means embrace. So he's talking to Banquo there. He says, let me enfold thee. That means let me embrace you. He's speaking metaphorically. He's basically wanting to become like a home, like a greenhouse, metaphorically, around Banquo to allow him to grow. And he's talking about wanting to grow Macbeth and Banquo, to make them become powerful. And basically, this shows that Duncan thinks of his role as king in terms of what he can give, not what he gets, but what he can give. And it's really setting him up as a good king that you wouldn't want to dispose of. And basically, Macbeth is the complete opposite. From the very get-go, he is thinking of the world in terms of what he can gain. We look at line 34. Duncan says, my plenteous joys. Again, it's showing that he is not only secure, but he is grateful and generous. So you could highlight a lot of these quotes. You could highlight my plenteous joys, let me enfold thee, things like that. And all of these are quotes that you could record at the start of your booklet to show that Duncan is a good king. That's what they're all showing, and the way he thinks of his role as king. On line 35, the word wanton means unrestrained. And then we go down to line 40, and this is the pinnacle line of this scene. And it's where he says, Malcolm, who we name hereafter the Prince of Cumberland. And this was a very educated line. If Shakespeare hadn't been writing this for King James, if he'd been writing it more for the penny pinchers, the masses that would watch in the Globe Theatre, he might have to add something in here. He might have to say something which means he'll be king, because it's not spelt out. But if you were a Scottish king and from a line of Scottish royals and were brought up in the Scottish palaces like King James was, you know that if you are named Prince of Cumberland, that means you are heir to the throne of Scotland. And so Macbeth would have been standing there ready for his reward, ready to be told, you're Thane of Cawdor and now you're king. And he hears, no, Malcolm will be king. Of course, because he was the king's eldest son. Underneath, Duncan goes on to explain what that means, that Malcolm will be king. And it says, invest him only, which means to be conferred upon. So it doesn't mean that Malcolm's not going to be the only one receiving honours. Basically, other titles of nobility are going to shine like stars upon everyone else is here. And then he says to Macbeth, from hence to Inverness. And it's important there to circle Inverness and to know that Inverness is Macbeth's castle. And if you look at our maps, Inverness is right at the top there to the west of Forres, where this is taking place. So they're going to go west to Inverness, and it's not nearly as far as it was from Forres down to Fife. And Macbeth insists that he's going to go ahead, he's going to be the harbinger, that's the forerunner who goes out before everyone else, and he says it's because he wants to let his wife know and prepare her for their guests. But we kind of already know, if we've seen his character, that that's not true. And just to drive it home further, if we turn to page 28, is one of the most famous little bits of the play. And this shows the theme of appearance versus reality again, the idea of covering up, the idea of hiding the truth. And it also shows the nature of good versus evil. And I'll just read the whole bit for you again. It says, that is a step on which I must fall down or else I will leap, which means I need to find a way to get around this whole Prince of Cumberland thing. And then it says, stars, hide your fires, let not light see my black and deep desires. The eye wink at the hand, yet let that be which the eye fears, when it is done to see. So this means let the eye not see what the hand does, and yet let the deed be done that the eye will be afraid to look at once it is done. Okay, so to unpack that further, it means I know I have to murder Duncan, but I don't think I can mentally handle it. So I don't want to see it happen. I just want to let the hand do it. I'm going to do it, and I don't want to be able to see it. And it's also, if you want to look at that further, it's like, don't let anyone else see it. Let this all be completely covered in darkness, happen in the darkness, and let it not come to light. So basically, this is the clearest point, the earliest point, where we see that Macbeth is aware of his two-facedness. So he perhaps believed, as I've been saying, that he was going to be named heir, and hearing Malcolm publicly acknowledged has resurfaced these dark thoughts of murder. Okay, and so that's the end of that. You should be able to now do your activities for scenes 3 and 4 in your booklet. We'll be going through the booklet on Teams, where you can ask me any questions, but aim to get all of your booklet work done by the end of the Easter holidays.